Hey, Jim, have you ever wondered what makes sourdough sour
Yes.
and like way better than all the other breads?
hmm I don't know if I would say it's way better for my own taste buds. I would say I like lots of bread and
That's true. That's true.
appreciate their differences, and I
Yeah.
like sourdough a lot.
Have you heard that it's healthier for you?
I've not heard that.
Okay, well, some people think it's healthier for you, and some people wonder about what makes it so sour, what makes some sourdoughs taste different than others.
Uh-huh.
And it's all chemistry or biochemistry, maybe more accurately. So, you ready to learn about the science behind sourdough bread?
I'm very ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hey, I'm Melissa.
I'm Jam.
And I'm a chemist.
And I'm not.
And welcome to Chemistry for Your Life.
The podcast helps you understand the chemistry of your everyday life.
Okay, well, today was inspired by a lot of people. This is our first 2025 episode, so Happy New Year to all of you.
Yes, first time recording in 2025.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
We got a little bit ahead, and then we were able to take little breaks while we were traveling and being with our families.
Yeah.
So, this episode was inspired by so many people.
Yeah, we've been asked this a bunch, haven't we?
Yes, community member Latila asked about what's the chemistry of sourdough. She asked that on one of our Instagram, getting ready for a bonus episode. Sean on Instagram also said, where does the sour come from in sourdough? Community member Avishai had shared some about this when we brought up sourdough on a bonus episode. So if you're curious about that, you can listen to May 2023's bonus episode. We shared some from Avishai. And then Angie E., who we worked with at the shampoo company.
Oh, yeah.
Why can't I think of the name of that? Formulate.
Yes.
Asked about sourdough bread. What is it up with the fermentation process and why is it good for your gut health? And my question is it even good for your gut health, you know? And then Rachel E. on our website submission asked about tap water and sourdough bread, and there's a few other things about different flavors of bread. And so we have all kinds of people wondering about sourdough bread. And I was like, it's time.
Wow. Yeah. It definitely seems like it's time.
There's even someone in my own home. My husband loves to make sourdough bread, and someone in your home, your mother-in-law, loves to make sourdough bread. So, we're eating a lot of sourdough bread, and it's time to get to the bottom of it.
Yes.
So before I answer all those questions, I feel like I wanted to start with kind of an overview.
Okay.
Of here's the science of it. And it is more broad science, less chemistry specific, but of course there's chemistry involved.
Right.
And then I sort of have a list of questions that I'll answer at the end. Okay, so I think it's safe to say that sourdough is very popular right now. I think it kind of kicked off during the pandemic and people have just kind of kept up with it.
Yeah.
And so I'll say that essentially the difference between sourdough bread and other types of bread is in the microorganisms that make the bread. Okay. And when I say microorganisms, I mean microscopic organisms. So very small organisms.
But mighty.
Small but mighty. Small but give us bread. I mean,
yeah.
So one microorganisms that I'm pretty sure everybody has heard about, is yeast. Yeast are in all bread. They're fungi. I guess not all bread. Some bread can be used with baking powder or, baking soda and an acid, which we have an episode on already. So you can check that out. What's the difference between baking soda and baking powder?
And would there be any in just like totally flat bread, tortillas and stuff like that?
I don't know if there's yeast in those actually. Yeah. My husband makes naan sometimes and I don't think there's yeast in that, but I think they do use a leavening agent. I think like the baking soda or something like that. I think for most of them, I guess there's some unleavened bread.
Right.
But yeast is in all of the airy, fluffy bread, I guess I'll say.
Right.
And yeast are fungi. And I know that we're going to get a lot of fungi puns from Jam, so I'm getting out ahead of it. They're single-celled organisms that consume starches. And starches are made of the elements of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They're basically sugars. And they consume them as an energy source, and they'll keep a lot of those carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen as energy. But what they don't use, they get rid of in byproducts.
Okay.
And typically one of those things they release is carbon dioxide, which is a gas at room temperature. So it's essentially like yeast flatulence, basically. If you really think about it, it's like when we get rid of gas as a byproduct.
Right.
So it's kind of silly, but that's true. Okay. So that gas is then trapped by gluten, which is a network of proteins. And we have a whole episode on that. I actually looked this one up, episode 149, What is Gluten?
Nice.
And that carbon dioxide being trapped in that protein network is what makes bread fluffy. Then we bake it, and sort of freeze it in place. But it gives you these air pockets that give the nice fluffiness to our bread.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeast can also release other byproducts, which are typically other arrangements of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, that will also add to the flavor. But different strains of yeast may produce different side products. But the biggest thing that the yeast do is make that carbon dioxide.
Okay.
So a big difference in sourdough bread versus the other kind of bread is the type of yeast that they use. So most bread use what we buy at the store, baker's yeast, like in a jar at the store, you can get that, or like in a little packet.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of yeast, it's a known strain called dang it, I even looked up how to say it and I already forgot. Saccharomyces cerevisiae. I can't believe I forgot already. But it's a known strain, and it's known for quickly consuming the starches and whatnot, and quickly producing carbon dioxide, but there's not a ton of flavor that comes with it.
Okay, yeah.
So known for sort of being like this is a steady, not going to impact the flavor much, going to give us our bubbles, that's what it's known for.
Right.
Okay. And that process of it consuming the starches and producing carbon dioxide, that is known as fermentation. So I think we've talked about that before.
Yes.
So in sourdough starters, we don't have a known strain of isolated yeast that we add to it. We allow it to ferment on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially sourdough starters use flour and water to make a really, really good food source for microorganisms to grow. So essentially we say, here yeast, have a feast. But it's not just yeast. I'll say that it's a lot of microorganisms want to feast, but those yeast and all those microorganisms come from all over.
Yeah.
So they can be in the air. We have microorganisms on our hand. They can be in the jar that you make your sourdough starter in. One study found that clean filtered air limited the growth of the sourdough starter.
Oh, okay.
Which
Makes
indicates
sense.
the air is a good source of those microorganisms.
It seems like if we are wanting a delicious bread,
Mm-hmm.
in order to get that to make a good place for them to eat, to feast,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like the yeast we could do for them.
Oh gosh, I thought it was going to be a real question. You
know,
waited to get the face until the end.
It's like a tit for tat, you know what I mean? Like, we want something, we give something,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we give them their sourdough starter, and so we get microorganisms from everywhere: the air, the jar that it's in, probably some from your hands, some from the even the flour itself comes with a lot of microorganisms in it. And actually, what's interesting is those microorganisms are especially attracted to plants, because they have stored carbohydrates in them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we eat plants too. And so the shells of wheat, for example, are a really good source of microorganisms. And so that's why often whole grain bread is whole grain flour, is preferable in sourdough starters than white flour, which has the shells removed,
Right.
is because all those microorganisms are just still on the shell and in the whole grain sourdough starter. So there's still some in white flour, but it might take longer. And so you might have to try to be more intentional about putting some microorganisms in there. So, so that's all the microorganisms that get into our sourdough starter are sort of gotten there naturally, but it's not just yeast. That's the microorganism. Of course, we also have bacteria everywhere on our hands, on, plants everywhere. So we are also inviting bacteria to thrive in this environment. And so that essentially means that this flour and water combination that we make a sourdough starter out of is rotting. Which is kind of gross.
Yeah.
It's fermenting.
Right.
Like I wouldn't eat fermented strawberries.
Right. This is ending up being, so I mean, I know it's going to have to take a different turn as well, but like, because with kombucha, which we've talked about, there's also both bacteria and yeast present. And you need them both.
Yeah.
And you get that culture of the SCOBY going on, which is, I think, actually more from the bacteria, I think, if I think about it.
Okay. So something similar happens here where, for the first few days when you have this sourdough situation, the sourdough starter, the first few days you have it going on, it can sometimes develop a really bad smell and like have a really gross phase. And that is because if you give a really good energy source to microorganisms, all types of bacteria and yeast are going to thrive, including pathogenic bacteria that will make us sick. But over time, the lactic acid producing bacteria that will start to colonize, and lots of other types of acid too, bacteria will start to produce these types of acid, and that will acidify the starter. And as the starter becomes more acidic over time, only certain types of bacteria can survive in the acidic environment. So sort of like the lactic acid or acid in general producing bacteria that shows up, that colonizes with everyone else in this, they call them like initial colonizers or initial colony forming. They secrete this acid that then it's like, all right, now nobody else can live here. So they kind of just kill off these other pathogenic, dangerous bacteria.
Nice.
By making an environment so acidic that they're the only ones that can kind of thrive.
Yeah. Wow.
And then, most of the bacteria that's left, it has to be bacteria that can survive in this sour, acidic environment. So most of those are safe, relatively safe for us. And then the yeast also thrives in that environment. So then they start to have this symbiotic relationship where they're producing things that are beneficial for one another. So both the yeast and this particular type of bacteria together make the perfect starter where the yeast is thriving and being able to produce a lot of carbon dioxide, and the bacteria is thriving and producing a lot of acid. And so the yeast give us the air that gives the bubbles to our bread, and the bacteria give us the acid that gives the sour taste to our sourdough.
Wow. That's awesome.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I think I knew that it was complicated, but I didn't really think about there being that kind of awesome kind of perfection of symbiosis there, whatever you call that.
Yeah, something I thought about was sometimes in the Bible they talk about like leavened bread ruining the whole batch.
Right,
like
a little bit of leaven.
A little bit of yeast can ruin the whole batch. And I remember being confused by that because it's like, oh, you want sourdough yeast or whatever. But I wonder if you're thinking like in that initial stage when it's pathogenic, and then if that gets into the whole loaf, like, that would be bad, you know?
And they had so many times where they're trying to intentionally make unleavened bread. So I wonder if they're thinking too, like, if a little bit gets in there, it's overdue.
The whole thing's leavened.
It's going to be, it's going to grow. That's crazy. And we've had friends who like, have a starter, or they're trying to get one going and it doesn't work right or whatever. I'm like, oh, it's so interesting because if it doesn't quite go that way and get past that weird phase or whatever, then it's like,
if you use the wrong flour that doesn't have enough yeast,
Right.
or it might take longer.
it's like we're talking, there's all kinds of microorganisms like, oh, the wrong kind thrived and it never quite got to the perfect stage.
Yeah, but for most people, it does.
That's crazy.
I know.
Huh.
And okay, so there's lots of other crazy things.
Mhm.
Because of the way that we sort of naturally get the yeast and the bacteria, that means that there is no standard sourdough.
Mm-hmm.
And every single sourdough starter is likely slightly different or significantly different depending on where they are in the world, what kind of flour they use, than others, which is really cool. But that also can be responsible for some of the flavor differences.
Yeah.
Because there's no standard strain like, oh, we all have this kind of yeast. It's like there is lactic acid and sometimes other type of acid producing bacteria, and there's yeast producing carbon dioxide, and that's what gets us sourdough bread, and that's the like only consistencies.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so, well, I guess I'll answer it in the way that I planned. So that's sort of the overview.
Okay.
You can tell it back to me if you want. Do you think that would be valuable?
I think so, probably,
Okay.
to make sure
Okay.
I'm understanding the phases right and the order they happen, kind of thing.
Okay, so you tell that back to me, and then I'll like sort of answer this list of questions I compiled that were like similar questions that people asked a lot.
So we start off with ideally some wheat flour
Mm-hmm.
and some water
Mm-hmm.
in like a jar or something
Mm-hmm.
on your counter.
It could be any type of whole grain flour
Okay.
and water. Yeah, in a jar on your counter. And there's like guides, and there's this scientist who runs like the global sourdough project. That's really cool. So,
Whoa.
yes.
So you do that. There is already microorganisms in the flour,
Mm-hmm.
bacteria and yeast already, both.
Yep.
Okay. And then in the air, on our hands.
Yeah, if you like touch it
In
to
the-
like scoop off the thing, there
Mhm.
you go. All your bacteria colonizing right in there.
I thought of a question just now that I bet is in there, but if not, I will remember really hard to ask it. So, we combine those things and then we wait,
Mm-hmm.
and that creates an environment where we've added the flour and the water.
Mm-hmm.
These, and I guess the temperature's helping, right? It being
Mhm.
like room temp. It's
Yeah,
not super cold.
Warmer things gives things more. Warmer spaces is essentially more energy in the air. More energy in the air transfers to energy in these microorganisms. So warmer places thrive more.
Water allows things to move and interact and
Yeah.
stuff.
Mhm.
And initially, most of the time, there's the bacteria growing first.
I think they grow together.
They go together, but the weird yucky phase is a bacteria thing. Mostly.
It's like bad bacteria.
Bad bacteria.
Yeah,
that's
it's not just like the bacteria that's in all
Right.
of our cheese and milk. It's like bacteria that might make you sick, or
Right.
like if you've ever seen people take a culture of your
Mhm,
hands and
mhm.
grow the bacteria. There's people on YouTube and like
Yeah.
TikTok shorts that they're like, I swabbed all this and then
Mhm.
grew it, and look at these
yeah.
strep bacteria or whatever.
Right.
I
So
love watching those.
The bad ones, I mean, they don't think they're bad, but
Mhm.
they're not good for bread for us
Yeah.
as humans.
They can hurt us.
Yeah.
They smell bad.
They tend to grow first,
Mm-hmm.
or not first, but they are thriving on in that earlier stage
Mm-hmm.
when it's not good to use it for
Yeah.
baking.
That's day
Yet.
like 1 through 4.
Okay. And so once that phase has been able to pass and some of the other bacteria and the yeast has had a chance to grow too,
Mhm.
is it the which thing creates the lactic acid? Is it the yeast or the bacteria?
The bacteria.
Okay,
So and this is
bacteria.
the same bacteria that's in cheese that we've talked about before, and yogurt. It's lactobacillus, I think, but
Uh-huh.
basically lactic acid producing bacteria.
Got it. So it starts getting its foothold going and
Mhm.
reproducing and stuff quite well, and producing enough lactic acid
Mm-hmm.
that it kills the bacteria we do not want.
Yeah. Basically, it kills any bacteria that can't survive in acidic conditions.
Nice. And wouldn't you know, that's exactly what we want going on here.
Exactly.
And so then bacteria we are cool with that produces lactic acid and the yeast get to keep on growing and reproducing and making a meal out of this jar of stuff. And they get to also, because even just in the starter, they're doing the releasing carbon dioxide, right?
Yeah, in the starter they are. So
because it's like I've seen my mother-in-law's like overflow.
Yes. In the starter there, that's like you feed it bread, and when they eat the bread, then as they consume the bread, they're going to give off that gas. The yeast are the ones giving off the gas.
Yeah.
So the key to making the bread is then taking some of that starter and like, okay, oh yeah, my yeast are happy. They're eating and they're giving off carbon dioxide. So now I'm going to put them in this much larger amount of bread and then they'll be distributed and then they give off the right perfect amount of bubbles to raise up a sourdough.
Got it.
So there's like when Mason makes bread, he has like a schedule where it's like he feeds the bread at this time. And then after this much time, that's when the yeast are like at their peak production. And then you take them then and put them in the bigger amount of flour that you're going to use to actually make dough. And then you add a little salt to that. And then you like knead it and let it rise up. So the yeast are putting more air bubbles in it. And then you do something else. And then, so there's a whole art to the actual making of the sourdough bread. This is just about, I guess, the chemistry of the sourdough starter.
Got it.
And what happens then also when you put it in the dough is like the yeast are doing the same thing.
Okay. Got it. Did I miss any phases there?
I don't think so.
This is what that we just explained a second ago about then the schedule of feeding it, taking some, mixing with a larger thing of what's going to actually become your bread and stuff. That is what prevents me from getting into this. It's so interesting, and I love the results so much. There's a lot there that is typically the kinds of things that really lure me in.
Yeah.
But I think it's the fact that I can't just at night after the kids are asleep knock it out. Boom, 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 boom. There's several stages like that, and I just don't think I can pull it off, and it deters me enough.
It is. So here's two things I'll say. One, you could ask my husband, who's already done all the research, and he can distill it down to the most important things for you, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think it's really good for working from home, or I'm going to be home all day days. So it's like, I can time this out just right to where I feed it before I go to bed. And then the next day when I wake up, I can do this, and then I can hang out with the kids, whatever. And then it takes like 10 minutes every hour or something, It's like a good thing if you're going to be home all day.
Totally. Yeah.
But when you're in and out all day or whatever, which I know sometimes you are, that makes it harder.
Yeah. And these days I mostly am. I think the other thing too is that when my mother-in-law's done it, I love the result. In general, she's not in a hurry person ever really, but so that's part of what's at play here. It just is, she's kind of all day. It doesn't really seem to me like she's like, oh, I'm doing this for a second and I'm going to do other stuff. It kind of seems to me like, man, it felt like she was in the kitchen for like hours just doing stuff,
Yeah.
And
well,
so,
I will say it is an all day affair for Mason, but it'll be like, he sets a timer and it'll be like, okay, for this period, I need to knead something every 30 minutes or whatever. So
that's why I think I'll stick with eating other people's sourdough that they make.
Yeah. I have tried to make sourdough before and it failed epically, and I got in a fight with my roommate at the time. And then I was like, this isn't for me. And I don't know if I ever will go back to it. I could see myself taking Mason's sourdough starter and making other things with it. Like, I'm going to use this to make focaccia. I'm going to use this to make this or that. But I love that he loves making sourdough.
Nice. Yeah. And there's other things I've done, like doing, like I mentioned earlier, kombucha. Like I know that well, and I know that I could get back into that at some point.
Yeah.
But even that right now, I don't think I could do. So, but at some point, maybe we can just trade. I'll make some kombucha.
And he loves kombucha.
Nice. Okay. Future trade happening.
Okay,
Future
so
bartering.
here's some fun questions that I have condensed down and that I'll answer. So,
okay.
What makes a sourdough sour? Now we know is acid.
Right.
So that it's lactic acid, but there are some other acids that like give a distinct flavor. Like sometimes acetic acid, which is kind of vinegary, will be in there. So that's the primary thing is the acid. What causes some loaves to have more sour flavor than others? Well, we learned about the different cultures of bacteria and the different strains of yeast. And so a lot of studies show that literally every single sourdough starter has a different microbiome. Even there was, I think it's from the World Sourdough Project, but now I'm not positive, which is like a research project that somebody who works, I think at maybe North Carolina State or something like that, has put together a whole research lab about sourdough.
Wow.
And so somebody, though, sent 16 different bakers, like in different places, the same sourdough starter material. So not the starter, but like here's the flour and here's the water and here's the instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And then they flew all the people together and they tested their microbiome in their starter and on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was all of the starters had the initial microbiome, like the bacteria, microorganisms that the flour that you would expect it to have.
Right.
But they all also had different bacteria and microorganisms from the people's hands, from the air in their homes, etc. But not only that, all of the people's hands had taken on the microorganisms and like from the bread. So it's like our microorganisms colonize the bread, but then the bread colonizes us back. And I do remember a very cool radio lab where about shaking hands. Do you remember this?
Oh, yes. Oh, I don't really remember it very well, but like as soon as you said that, I was like, I definitely listened to that one.
Yes, where it was like two people shook hands and like whose microbiome won, kind of.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And there was one of my sources said that, I can't remember the exact statistic, and I had a hard time relocating it, but it was like people who make sourdough bread are like 25% more of the lactic acid producing bacteria on their hands, like day to day or something like that. So your sourdough bread is colonizing you back.
Wow, that's
your
crazy.
Your bacteria are colonizing it, but it's colonizing you back, which is crazy.
Wow.
And that can really impact the strains of yeast and things like that, can impact the flavor. But it also makes research on sourdough a little bit difficult, which kind of gets me to my next question, which is sourdough bread really healthier for you? Is because there's not, the jury is out. We don't know if sourdough bread is really healthier for you because of what we were just talking about. Every person's sourdough is different.
Right.
So research studies on sourdough are not reproducible. There's not a standardized, this is how sourdough works, and here we go.
Right.
And so if we had some kind of standardized sourdough method, I think that would make it easier. But for example, one research lab had 2 papers out. It's the same research lab, same people doing the paper. And one, they tested the impact of sourdough bread on the blood sugar, and the sourdough bread had a much lower impact. It was, I think, statistically significantly lower than other types of bread. That was a sourdough starter that they had made and they tested in the lab. They did another study where they purchased a bunch of different breads from all from the same company, but all these different breads from the company. And the sourdough bread did a little bit better, but it was not like statistically significant. And like a sprouted grain bread had done better than the sourdough.
Okay.
In terms of blood sugar impact. And in that paper, they note that it very likely is because they made their own sourdough starter, which is naturally going to have a different, whole process than if you have it in a factory.
Yeah. Wow.
So because sourdough is so different, it's hard to tell. But so, and I tried to read a lot of reviews and things, and And one thing that does, so reviews are research articles that summarize a bunch of other research articles and try to kind of draw overarching conclusions about what the research is saying, big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And they do, say, take it with a grain of salt. I try to, I was like, oh, that would have been a good opportunity for a pun, but.
Yeah, take it with a grain of wheat.
Yeah. Take it with a grain of yeast. But so, we don't know for sure. The jury's out. It's not definitely worse for you. We also can't say it's definitely better. But the higher the acidity, so the longer it's allowed to ferment, if you can get your, if you have like pH strips, maybe you made them from poinsettias.
Mm-hmm.
The acidity being above 5 is like 4.5, I think, and higher, then you'll see more positive effects in the sourdough starter of like breaking down FODMAPs, which is like things that are known to irritate your colon. And there's a few other things. I can't remember all of them now, but essentially if you could let it go longer and let it have a higher acidity, there was a reduction of things that irritate the bowel and it seemed easier to digest. So those were things that they did see. So if you're a at-home sourdough baker, there is a high probability that if you can let it get more sour, you're going to see improved health effects than less sour.
Mm-hmm.
So let it make more acid, basically. And they say that maybe fermenting longer, so doing, I think, larger amounts of flour less often, maybe is the thing to do for that.
Huh.
Another question is, I've heard some claim that the tap water shouldn't be used because of the chemicals that are used in water treatment plants can work against your yeast growth. Is there any validity to their claims? So I was surprised to find that the water that you use does matter.
Huh.
There was a paper who studied sourdough in a few different regions of Italy that I guess are well known for their sourdough breads. And the microbiome in the sourdough starter was similar to that of the water.
Mm-hmm.
So not surprising.
Right.
Seemed like the water contributed positively to these microorganisms.
Mm-hmm.
But another study looked at chlorinated water sources and found that although chlorinated water doesn't slow down your yeast growth, the bacteria that it produces are more likely to have some of the genetic markers that are associated with bacteria resistant to antibiotics.
Oh.
And so it seems like maybe having chlorinated water could ultimately have some negative impact in that way, which I was surprised by. So, and Mason doesn't use tap water.
Yeah.
Which I was like, did you research that? It's probably nothing. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, actually, maybe it's good. So, yeah, so that is something that I thought was really interesting. And, I forgot to talk about this on the healthy side of things, but because the sourdough, we think it's because of the acidity of it. Because of that, it is resistant to mold and basically going bad for longer.
Oh, yeah.
So if you leave like white bread versus sourdough bread out, the white bread will start to mold up sooner than the sourdough. Yeah.
Dang.
But we do freeze our sourdough pretty quickly. So
yeah.
Isn't that fun?
That's so crazy. Do you have any other questions? They're on there?
No, I think those are the big ones.
Okay, I have one that, if we have time for it, or should I save it?
Let's go ahead and save it because I do think there was a question that I didn't get to from one of the emails about stainless steel.
That's the question I was going to ask.
Oh, wait, you have the same question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, save it.
Okay.
I'll answer it. I have a plan to answer that in the Q&R that comes out after this.
Okay. Deal.
And I thought also it'd be fun in that Q&R to have Mason come on and describe his process.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's an Easter egg right there. That's something that does not happen often.
No, it's hard to get either
played
of our
right
spouses.
into our hands.
I know. It's hard to get either of our spouses on mic because they are very private people.
Mm-hmm.
There are opposites in many ways.
Yeah, it's like they don't seek any sort of audience for anything that they do. It's completely perplexing. It's odd.
Completely perplexing and the opposite of us in every way.
It's like they're happy just to like keep to themselves and
live their lives in private.
Yeah.
To
just make some tasty bread in obscurity and not tell the world about it. It's so weird.
Yeah, if I love something, I want to tell everyone about it.
Yeah, me too.
Chemistry, I love it. Mm-hmm. I'm here to tell you all about it. Well, I think that's it. But I was going to ask for our end of episode question, how do you like to eat your sourdough bread? Like, what toppings do you like on it?
Such a good question. I mean, I don't know that I've really tried a bunch of different options, but I have most of the time when my mother-in-law's made some and she's like, guys, help me eat this. I put a couple in the freezer, but like these two, let's eat in the next few days or whatever. I'm like going in and I'm the first or second slice I have of it, which we just kind of do that. We don't like just do anything else with it. Like whatever, like make a sandwich or something. It's more just like I'm making a slice of this because it's so good. I'm putting butter, just spreading some butter. We always have some room temp butter available. But what I've also occasionally done is done some butter and some honey.
Ooh, I haven't done that.
It's very, very good. I do that on biscuits and stuff like that too, but it's obviously a very different experience with the sourdough and you get the texture that's so different and stuff. Yeah. But that's it. I haven't done anything crazy.
I like to do butter with a little bit of salt because we have unsalted butter.
Yes.
And that's good.
Nice.
I have been using it for my avocado toast lately, but the big winner for me lately is I've been, because we've had a few snow days.
Putting some snow on it. Oh,
snow.
Cool.
No, using it for grilled cheese sandwiches.
Oh, that sounds
it's really
so
good. And you got to do the thing where you put either oil or butter on it and then like put it on the cast iron so it gets that nice crispy. It's very good.
Yes.
It's good for everything, but that's probably my top right now.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice.
So comment below on our YouTube channel or reach out to us on Instagram and tell us how you like to eat your sourdough. Send us cute pictures of your sourdough loaves and we'll take cute pictures of Mason's and put them online and of Barb's and put hers online as well.
Yes.
Great.
That's awesome.
Well, thanks for letting me tell you all about. I know it was only low key chemistry, like searches or chemistry and acids chemistry, but it was all biochemistry.
Absolutely.
So thanks.
And I'm sure that anyone making sourdough feels a bit like they're in a lab doing some stuff. You know what I mean?
They are.
So.
And all these little yeast and bacteria are little synthetic chemists. They're synthesizing molecules, so.
Yeah, I think.
And in that way, so are we.
I don't think someone's standing in there thinking, I'm doing biology. I think they're like, if anyone's doing it, I think they're like, I feel like I'm a chemist right now in a lab. Like
the biologists might resent you for that.
No, I'm not saying it's not biology. I'm saying the average, home sourdough baker.
They'll feel.
Is probably like relating to that. Anyway, thank you for teaching us. Thank you, all of you, many of you who asked these questions. And if you'd like to send us some questions, ideas, thoughts, follow-up questions to anything about sourdough, please send us your questions and ideas on our website at chemforyourlife.com. That's chemforyourlife.com to share your thoughts and ideas and questions with us. If you'd like to help us keep our show going and contribute to cover the cost of making it, you can join our super cool Chem community of patrons on patreon.com/chemforyourlife. You get super cool perks, ways of us saying thank you. You get an ad-free feed of the show. You get depending on which tier you pick, you get a monthly coffee hour with Melissa and I online, stuff like that. And it's a cool group of people that we really enjoy talking to and learning about. So join that, support the show, keep it free for everybody else, keep it going. But if you're not able to do that, you can still help us by subscribing on your favorite podcast app, writing a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribing to our YouTube channel. We got a comment over there, which people have been doing lately, which has been really fun.
Yeah.
Those things help us to share chemistry with even more people, help more people to stumble across and discover the show and have the chemistry of their everyday life explained to them.
Somebody said that my voice sounds like ASMR on YouTube, so
nice.
I thought that was a high compliment.
Absolutely.
Maybe I should start doing chemistry ASMR.
There you go.
I don't really know what that looks like, but I'm down for that.
It sounds like a niche that's probably wide open.
Probably.
For someone for the taking,
This episode of Chemistry for Your Life was created by me, Melissa Collini, and him, Jim Robinson. He is our audio producer. Look at all this beautiful sound. I guess you can't look at it. Listen to all this beautiful sound that he makes happen.
Look at all this sound and listen to all this video.
And those really cool thumbnails on YouTube. The Benadryl one really made me laugh. And of course, it was made possible by our community on Patreon. And so we're going to thank every one of those Patreon community members by name. So we'd like to thank Chris and Claire S., Hunter R., Katrina B., Lynn S., Scott B., Stephen B., Tim P., Brian K., Chelsea M., Dorian V., Elizabeth P., Heather R., John T., Jesse R., Latila, Rachel R., Autoclave, Avishai B., Chelsea B., Sierra L., Cullen R., Emerson W., Erica B., Jacob T., Jeanette N., Julie S., Christina G., Sarah M., Suzanne P., and Venus R. You are all amazing. It's so fun that list is getting so long. We've really enjoyed getting to know you, and we really appreciate that you are supporting the show.
And if you'd like to learn more about today's chemistry lesson, you can check out the references for this episode in our show notes and in the description of the video on YouTube.
And yay, chemistry bread.
Yay, chemistry.
That's fun.